have been talking about identity threats and then controls around it and implementation and things. I was thinking of identity. I think it also applies to some other identity products, but from the perspective of identity threat detection, there are a lot of correlation that we are doing, like we were saying, and then we are working with a lot of different data sources. And of course, a number of numerous identities of different kinds that we were talking about. How about the privacy aspects of that? Like, with respect to that, do we need to do something extra as a security team? Do we, just because we're dealing with, thousands or maybe millions of such identities, and of course, different data sources, different kind of correlation. Now everything is brought into one place, which means also that there is a possibility of that becoming a critical asset itself. And you, of course, need to safeguard that. So from that perspective, and given that a lot of different regions, right, listeners could be from any region, we have data protection compliances coming in, regulations coming in for all the regions gradually. So how do we take care of that with respect to having such controls and solution in place in our own organization?
Yeah. The good part, I think, from at least from a data privacy perspective, is that the ones that we run into the most often are pretty well defined in terms of what you have to do. There will be controls on, for example, how you store and process the data, where you store and process the data, who can access it, right? And there are audit practices built around purely data privacy. And so as long as you're working within that framework, there are things that are okay to do and there are things that are not okay to do. But for the most part, privacy wise, there are very clear guidelines on what you can and cannot do. And there are, in larger organizations, there are also privacy officers, right? And there are their own internal audit teams that allow you to sort of demystify any place where it's not clear whether you can do something or not do something.
No, from that perspective, actually, so for example, from a data privacy perspective, do these solutions allow or have provisions for example, separate data storage for different kind of users from different products or from different regions? Like, do they come with these kind of provisions which can be customized?
Yeah, for the most part, for example, at least because I don't go super deep into this topic in general, like because I don't go into the architecture side as much on a day-to-day basis. But at least at a broad strokes level, what I do know is that there are region-specific compliances that need to be maintained, and those are relatively easy to maintain because they are, your cloud has regions, right? And so you can make sure that the data is, geographically stored in a place where that compliance allows for it. But it's really it's not necessarily a concern if you're talking about the type of data itself that we're storing. I mean, when you talk about any sort of an aggregation system, like for example, your endpoints are looking at every single process that's starting on your system, right? Your SIM is aggregating data about, from a vast array of other systems, maybe not just other security systems, but even, application logs, stuff like that. And they're all getting pooled into one place. And for the most part now, all of these solutions are cloud driven because you simply cannot scale storage on premises as you would want to anymore. And so with that, I'm not saying that these things are perfect yet, but I think at least the guidelines that we typically run into are fairly self-explanatory. What's allowed, what's not allowed. For example, simple stuff like, if you're storing passwords, it has to be stored in a particular format. It has to use this algorithm, and so it is fairly detailed, right? And remember that many organizations that are especially in this business tend to go over and above the minimum the basic requirements. That's important, right? So they do go to an extreme, and you would see that see that through the presence of a privacy officer in the org chart, because that's what they would do.
Yeah. I think there are anyways a lot of controls in that space, and I think it boils down to becoming an more like architecture specific area, like you called out, and then the placement of the product and the way it stands, and the way data flows across different components, across different obviously other components as well in your organization will be something that your security team as well as data privacy officers and others can have a look at and define the path ahead.